Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome the listeners today to enjoy my conversations with Nina Porakishvili, an expert on Sir Arthur Rostron, hero captain of the RMS Carpathia, who rescued the 712 Titanic survivors. Can you talk a little bit about just who you are? Because I think you have the most amazing backstory of, um, moving from Georgia to England and your job, which sounds incredible, and maybe, your degrees and.
Well, that's a long story, so I'll try to cut it short. I was the one who actually founded immunology, the first immunology department in the whole Southern Caucasus. And I led this department of immunology at Tbilisi State University, the major, the flagship. Let's say everything in my mind are ships now. It's sort of the flagship of Georgian education. And that was my contribution, because it's relatively new types of the subject, let's say, and not in the West, but in that part of the world, it was relatively new. And hence I established this first department. My interest is in research, not quite a lot of interest, but one particular interest is leukemia. So I started working on the chronic lymphocytic leukemia and the types of treatment, prognostication, so on. And also I was interested in anti-tumor vaccines. So there was an opportunity for me to travel to the UK, to London, to give a couple of lectures after already dissolution, or when Georgia became independent. And I don't know whether I made an impression or whatever. So I've been invited to first to come for a couple of years, then more and more, and therefore I've established myself first here at University College London and then at the University of Westminster. So I continue with my interest. I still keep really very I would say strong ties with Georgia. We have a lot of we had and now we're trying as well to continue a lot of the EU funded projects that we've again carried out with the various Georgian universities. Then we introduced into our network Armenia, Azerbaijan, and actually Ukraine. One of the projects was with the two of Ukrainian institutions. So we continue with those links. And I have a lot of teaching responsibilities here, and my research, of course, is going on as well. So that's in a nutshell.
What an amazing story. And so how long have you actually lived in London?
Permanently, that's about from 1996. So that makes it what, 26 years, almost 25, I would say, yeah.
Excellent. And how often do you get back to Georgia?
Oh, very often, before COVID, of course. Now it's all more complicated, but before, a couple of times a year, definitely. Sometimes even more.
So I wanted to ask you first how you became interested in Captain Arthur Rostron.
I think it's a very trivial type of the pathway towards Rostron for me. I simply just watched, I think, the best movie ever, A Night to Remember. And I must credit Anthony Bushell, who really played Rostron so well that got me interested in the character. And I think this is what I don't like about other films dedicated to Titanic is the excessive sentimentality. And this one is a really, and actually it affects you more when you feel that it is natural. and there is no kind of artificial type of the trying to squeeze the tears from your eyes artificially. It actually had a very, very interesting and serious impact. I never thought I would be interested in Titanic, but they got me interested in Carpathia, and from that, of course, the link started. So it all started with a movie. And then because if I'm interested in anything, I'll start collecting information like crazy. So I'm getting information from everywhere. So I collected, I think, really a huge number of the sources from different countries and so on. So I have this archive which I'm offering to the Facebook. And I've got interested, and I realized that he's so much more than this episode in his life than what we knew about him, because of his one night to remember.
Very true. Well said. I too feel very close to Sir Rostron. And I guess this is the time that I should tell our listeners that my grandmother was actually named in honor of him. So many people who are familiar with this channel know that my great-grandmother, Leah Axe, survived the sinking of the Titanic, but in the process of escaping, lost track of her 10-month-old baby, who was my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, and his name was Billy. So many people that are interested in Titanic know him as Baby Philly or the Titanic baby. And when she was escaping, she was kind of stuck in third class. She was offered some help to get up the back of the deck houses by young men who lifted her deck by deck using a kind of human ladder. Well, when I was teaching, I think that's another thing that we have in common, which we have many things in common. I did an experiment where I used the students in my Titanic class to show what it would actually be like to be lifted this way, 9.5 feet. And then, of course, to climb, you would have to then get across the railing. And what my great-grandmother always said and insisted on was that her and the baby traveled together, that she did not let go of him. And one of the things through this experiment that I found out was that once you put your foot on the deck of the next level, there's no way with a 20-pound baby to get yourself over the rail. And we tried this experiment, and I used actually an 18-year-old girl who was her same size. My great-grandmother was very tiny. And she simply was not able to get across that railing unless somebody took the baby from her arms.
Yes.
So she tragically got separated from the baby. And she maybe...
So this happened already on the deck of Carpathia when they got separated?
No, they were on the deck of the Titanic.
Titanic, okay, all right. So they were going down, climbing down.
Well, she was in third class, and she was trying to climb up, get help
to get to the, oh, I see, to get to the lifeboat, which was, of course, on the upper desk. Yes.
Yes. So basically the way she described it was that, there were 2 staircases, but they were both impassable. And that's because they had a low gate, which was locked. And there were, I heard men, crewmen, manning those gates, telling people you cannot come up to A deck, or no, that was actually B deck, and keeping people there. And so the stairs were completely impassable. And at a certain point, young men looked over and saw that these women and children couldn't do anything. They were
Trapped.
doomed. So they jumped down, maybe using a crane arm, maybe the crane housing, and then perhaps using the hatch covers, which were raised up off the deck, and then jumping down. And then they would have these women and children, they would help them from C deck, the aft well deck, up the back of the deck houses. Some people imagine, they think it was on the sides of the ship. Alas, it was not. It was on, the decks were like
Yes.
this, staggered. And so they went up the back of the deck houses, and maybe a young man said, step on my knee, or step in my hands, step on my shoulder, step on my head, and then pass to the next man. And my great-grandmother was not the only woman who made it this way. And so when she finally did get up, it was late in the sinking. So when she gets up to the A deck, or maybe even the boat deck, someone took the baby to help her. And at that time, if you remember, there was a man, the baker, Jockin, who, along with some other men, were trying to facilitate getting the babies into the lifeboats. Well, what my great-grandmother didn't know is that, especially on the port side, because of the list, the boats were hanging more away from the side of the ship. And
Yes.
so when you read about my great-grandmother, which I know that you probably have, and you even hear her story on the recording, which I will get to you. She thought, from her vantage point, that the baby had been thrown into the sea.
Oh no. So she even didn't think that the baby survived until
Right.
the very, wow, that's gosh, that's horrible to think. And what, apart from the whole situation of waiting for help, whether this help would arrive or not, she was also constantly thinking about, and she probably didn't have any hopes left for the survival of the baby. That's amazing. I can't even imagine how she felt.
By her own admission, she was in and out of the hospital for 10 months.
Wow.
With what she refers to as a nervous collapse.
Of
And
course she would.
you will hear that in her own voice.
Yes, of course she would. It's unbelievable. But I was also thinking, about those men who were helping her. Probably none of them survived, because these were just simple seamen, and there was no place for them in the lifeboats. They were real heroes.
Absolutely. I'm only here because of what they did,
Yes.
self.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And definitely, I can't say for sure that all of them died, but the many people I've talked to have the same thought you do. They probably all died.
Yes.
So she was completely beside herself when she finally got over the rail. And she said she ran everywhere looking for him, and she couldn't find him. Of course, he was already in a lifeboat, but she had no idea of this. So eventually, she also has some deviation in her own story. I have never had to fight for my life. Have you ever had to fight for your life?
Fight for my life? No, not really. No. No, not to such extent, definitely.
I think that was so traumatizing to her.
Mm.
I think first, losing sight of the baby.
That was the most horrible thing. Perhaps why she also kind of tried to keep herself alive and together was because she was already pregnant with another baby. So she had to look after this baby, isn't it?
Well, my grandmother actually was not conceived until 3 months.
Oh, until, okay, yeah. Sorry. That's
No,
my
no. No worries, because
Yeah.
it's so funny because,
3 months after. Okay. Mm-hmm.
people are always, saying, oh, your great grandmother was pregnant, with your grandmother.
Yeah.
I said, no, sorry.
Okay.
Because my
So-
grandma was born March 12th. So 11 months after
After.
the
Yeah.
sinking.
That's even harder for her because the only baby she had at the moment was the one she thought was lost. It's unbelievable.
I think also my great grandfather had left London supposedly before the baby was actually born. He was born in June.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he went, he may have had some family in Manchester or Liverpool. And I think that he went to work before he sailed to the United States, which he did finally in September of 1911. So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
she says that he didn't even see the baby. So in her mind, she's imagining her husband being furious that he didn't even get to meet his son, and that she had lost him and he was dead, and that he would be completely furious with her.
Yes. Another burden for her to think about.
Yeah, and I do think she really thought about that. And the next part of the story is probably the craziest part. And Nina, I think the thing that I think we were meant to be friends. I totally believe in that, in karma, in fate. And somehow we came together, and I would love to try and get a movie made not just about my family, but about the Carpathia.
That would be absolutely amazing. Carpathia deserves a movie, a separate movie. And if you just think about these, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 or 7 minutes dedicated to Carpathia in A Night to Remember, obviously it's not enough. And such an important story there. And if you really lead that, I'm absolutely not only happy, I will be excited to help as much as I can.
I think you'd be the perfect kind of historical manager of details and facts, because, I've been watching you and your posts for years. And, you really are dedicated in what I've seen to the Carpathia and also to Captain Rostron.
Absolutely. And as I'm saying, I say this is my historical crush. So I'm really, really interested in the person. And as I said, I know a lot about him. Sometimes I even think that I understand the way he thinks and the way he thought, rather, the way he behaved, why he made certain decisions based on not only the his biography, of course, when you can see the person, but also what followed for his life line after Carpathia, his contribution to the Great War, the way, you know, he really was always extremely care. He took a lot of care, but for him, the passengers were the major care. The people, the humanity, as he said, was the focus and the subject of care. So yes, if I can contribute to this great, I think this would be from your part one of the best possible contribution to the history and to art. And I am happy to go the whole way with you.
Well, thank you. I think that people just really minimalize both Captain Rostron and also the role of the ship, but also the experiences not only of the passengers that were on Carpathia that had nothing to do with Titanic, except they were witnesses to this unbelievable history. But then the story of the Carpathia for the 4 days it took them to get back to New York. And it's interesting to me because I don't think people think about that. It wasn't like they picked these lifeboats up and maybe the next day or whatever were able to make it to New York. It was not like that. They really had a rough time because as calm as the sea had been, now once they got picked up, all hell broke loose and there were storms and high seas and fog.
Absolutely. You know, I had the feeling that the ocean didn't want these were the ocean's victims, and the ocean didn't want, the seas didn't want kind of let them go. It was a feeling that they were trying to a certain extent to now to come back to the Carpathia in order to, you know, in order to get those saved victims back into the ocean where they belonged. Of course, it's just a fantasy, but really there was it was a very dramatic the way back to New York. And I also was thinking, you know, about his choice, why he decided to go to New York. In a very interesting way, he handled this choice, because he could have gone to the first of all, he couldn't continue his way back to Gibraltar because of the provisions and everything. He could have gone to Azores and left the survivors there. And that would be probably the easiest thing for him to do. You know what was very important? When these famous words, Mr. Dean turned the ship around. Yes, these are the real words that he told his first officer during that night. And when he did that, that was kind of like on impulse, obviously, because he was the man who was always aimed at helping and saving and, you know, always thinking about what he can do good. And this was the first reaction, turn the ship around, before he actually asked Cottam to confirm that the SOS or CQD came actually from Titanic. He first told Dean to turn the ship around, and then he asked Cottam to confirm, because he didn't want to lose even 1 second, 1 minute. He understood, obviously, how hard the situation would have been. But imagine that if he didn't know who else responded to the SOS. He didn't know where Olympic was. He approximately knew, of course, that Olympic was quite a way away, and they tried to get there on time, but they couldn't. But he didn't know what kind of other ships were around, and there were quite a few. So imagine that he turned around, he went all this way through, but the survivors were already picked up by someone else. That would be a huge waste of money for Cunard. And no one knows actually how they would have, if he wasn't successful in his rescue operation, simply because he was late and someone else was closer. So how they will take it in? Such a huge waste of money, because once he said that 1 hour of losing time on the seas. He said something like 10,000 of whatever of current money. So therefore, that will be millions lost for Cunard. They might have turned around and told him, you know, we're not happy with what you've done. Why didn't you just mind your own business and continue your cruise? And if that was the case, he actually was risking his career. And I don't think people are thinking about it. You know, he went there because he got all this glory and everything, but he was risking his career, really. And he never thought about it, that he was risking his career. He was simply thinking about those people. And that's why he didn't leave them in any other port, because that would have meant, imagine them actually going to the shore and then taking another ship, all those traumatized people, and getting back to New York. He got them under his wings, and he wanted to really smooth their way, let's say, back home. And they were going to New York, so he took him to New York. And also the way he said it, I like it. Unless otherwise, so I'm proceeding New York unless otherwise ordered. So now Cunard couldn't have turned around and said, well, we order you not to go to New York, because he already made this decision. This was a very diplomatic way of handling the situation. He just put them in front of the fact. He's taking them to New York. They couldn't have now refused him to do that unless otherwise ordered. I think this is a really very great type of diplomatic handling. So, but he was risking his career. Really, he was.
Kind of making me tear up a bit, because I just always had such a reverence and a feeling of gratitude.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you if he hadn't have done what he did. That's just it, pure and simple. If he had chosen to think about his career, if he had chosen to expect other people to do it, if he had messed up and gotten, the coordinates wrong,
Yes.
So many things could have happened, but they didn't.
They didn't. Yes, it's there's so many small kind of things, like there was this argument that he was risking his passengers because he was traveling with such a high speed. Well, first of all, I just found a plaque from the builders of Carpathia, and it says that the average loaded speed 15 knots. Not 13 knots, as everyone knows, I knew before, but no, it is 15 knots from the builders loaded. So that means that 17 knots they were traveling at wasn't as such a extraordinary speed for Carpathia. That it was a lot. But some people trying to blame him that he was traveling at such high speed that something might have happened to the turbine. But no, it was 15 was average for Carpathia. So 17 was very much acceptable. And the second, of course, these lookouts, the extra lookouts that he put on the deck, placed several officers, particularly his second officer who's been with him on many ships, including Pannonia and then Mauritania and then Berengaria, James Bissett. And James Bissett had extraordinary eyesight for some reason, even among the officers, and he knew that. So he put Bissett in front and said, just don't move from here. And we are relying on your eyesight. And Bissett was saying that he was like really frozen because of the weather and everything. And he had ice on his eyelashes, but he never moved from the position. and he was actually the one who spotted that the most dangerous, the iceberg, which they avoided by Rostron, immediately stopping the ship. And also what helped was because he was the RD, the reserve, the Royal Navy Reserve. He was trained in zigzagging among the not icebergs in particular, but zigzagging was something that they learned as a military in a navy, not in the just usual civil ships. So therefore, the fact that he was a Royal Navy Reserve, RNR, yes, means that he knew how to handle the zigzagging, and that was, and he couldn't have told the commission when the commission asked him about, where you're not risking your own ship. He couldn't have said, "I had confidence in me." He wouldn't have said that because he was a very modest person. But I think that's exactly what it was. He had all confidence in himself and his crew, including James Bissett.
James Bissett went on to captain the Queen Mary.
Yes, absolutely.
And one little fact you might not know is that in 1938, Lee Axe went on the Queen Mary, traveled back to London on the Queen Mary.
Wow. Yeah. Did they approach the captain and told them about their story and everything? No?
I wish I knew. There are so many questions I have. For instance, did they comp her ticket? Did they make her pay for a ticket? Because she often, by that time, I think White Star and Cunard were together.
Yes, they merged. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, either 1934, 35 when they merged.
So she did go again on an ocean liner. In 1923, she went on the Majestic across and the Leviathan home. And that was to attend the wedding of her sister-in-law, my Aunt Rose, to her husband, Jack.
Wow. So she wasn't afraid, no?
Well, she had to have been afraid. But on that trip, she took my grandmother, who was 9.
Yes.
And then she got on the Queen Mary. She went both ways in 1938. Then in 1951, she was on the Queen Elizabeth. And she went with her husband that time over to London.
Brave lady, definitely a brave lady. But, perhaps she saw that it can't happen twice. You survive such a disaster. You survive for a reason. So therefore, it can't happen for the second time.
That's interesting that you would mention that because I knew her, but I was young. And I do contemplate what she was like. And of course, talking to my father, who's 91, and he's given me, a lot of help. And my mother, her granddaughter, but that I never really considered. But you're right. She had to have been not a fatalist.
Yes.
She had to have been somewhat of a realist to do that. So
yes.
That's
but she definitely was a brave lady, no doubt about it.
Well, when I did the experiments at my university, and yes, were those brave young men helping the third-class women and children up, but she had to take their hand. She had to sit on their knee. And in one of her accounts, she said a lot of other women were just sitting on the deck with their children and they had just accepted their fate.
Yes, you need to fight until the very end. That's probably what she did, and she succeeded. Not only that, but she got her baby back. That's absolutely great. And as I said, Captain Rostron had to play a role of the King Solomon.
Another thing I don't think I mentioned to you, which really shows kind of how truly traumatized she was on the Carpathia after everything that we've talked about. She didn't find the baby right away. She, it was at least several days. And in one instance, she says it was like the fourth day. So she was on the Carpathia, and basically, one interview, she said she just took to a mattress and was morose. Nobody could get her to do anything, get up, eat. And so she had met a woman named Selena Cook, and eventually, once the weather cleared, because as I mentioned earlier, and you kind of talked about, the weather became very bad once they were on the Carpathia. So once the weather cleared, Selena Cook encouraged my great-grandmother to go up on the deck to get some air. Well, it was here walking along the deck that out of the corner of her eye, she sees a baby craning his arms out. She sees this just out of the corner of her eye. And then she looked over.
So that was towards her. Wow. So the baby really recognized her.
Absolutely.
Wow.
He was still breastfeeding. He knew that was his mother.
Yes. So
he found her.
Unbelievable. This is amazing. This was meant to happen, really. And the baby, I didn't know that it wasn't her who recognized the baby, but the baby recognized herself and then attracted attention to. Yes, amazing.
Her story kind of evolved, which is another part of it. And I wonder, on the Carpathia, I think there were so many widows, new widows, women who had lost a husband and a son, sometimes a father.
Yeah.
And
Marion Thayer, for example, thought she lost both, but then of course Jack survived again. That was another amazing story. Him swimming towards the one of the lifeboats, one of the collapsibles. But she thought initially, because they didn't see each other, were in the different lifeboats, so she didn't know that her son survived. She thought she lost both.
Well, amazingly, Marion Thayer was one of the witnesses when Captain Rostron was called, because what happened was the woman who had Philip, either through responsibility, she was just trying to be responsible. A lot of these women were just incredibly traumatized.
Yes.
And maybe she thought, this wasn't the baby's mother. It was just a traumatized woman who lost a child and wanted to replace it or something. So they were sent up to Captain Rostron's cabin to have him sort the matter out. So who was in Captain Rostron's cabin? Marion Thayer, Eleanor Widener, and Madeline Astor.
Yes.
So it's here where, as you said, Captain Rostron plays the role of Solomon, King Solomon in the Bible. Whose baby is this? I'm going to cut the baby in half unless the real mother, I can find the real mother. And of course, the real mother says, oh, it's not my baby. It's not, because she didn't want the baby cut in half. Well, these three society women witness this amazing drama.
Wow,
And
I didn't know that it was happening in that. And so obviously they went to his cabin. They didn't know that he left it really for those ladies. And Jack Thayer, I think, was also sleeping there on the floor, but only at night.
yeah, I heard one thing that said he was sleeping along the foot of the bed or something like that, but yeah, or on the floor or anything.
I
But
think he said on the floor or something like that, because obviously they would give him something to lie on, but not straight on the floor. Excuse me.
right.
Wow, this is so interesting. But why you mentioned Marion and not the other two ladies, that she was the witness? All three of them were.
All three were, only because you were just talking about Marion.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
But
he was the strongest, I think. That's why I asked. I think that Madeline was very much kind of particularly in a bad state in terms of she was pregnant and then she just lost her husband. And I think Mariam was a very composed lady. I have this impression of her, and that's why I thought maybe she took an active part in this recognition. I don't know.
it's interesting. I value all of these insights that I'm getting from you. And one of the stories, one of the legends is in my family was that Madeline Astor, that my great-grandmother met her on the Titanic waiting for lifeboats, and that Madeline Astor said, "Your baby looks cold," and then took off a scarf and wrapped it around the baby. Well, I think that did happen, but it was on the Carpathia.
Yes.
And so what happened was, in Captain Rostron's cabin, here is Madeline Astor, who was 1 year older. She was 19.
Yeah.
And she was also pregnant, also in great trauma, as you said. And these women pitied her. They felt sorry for my great-grandmother. She was just pathetic, really, in the way she, was acting. So that's when Madeline Astor took off her scarf, or one of those three women. I want to make sure when I write my book that I'm as accurate as possible. Could it have been Madeline Astor who gave her the scarf? Absolutely. Could have been Marion Thayer. It could have been Eleanor Widener. But it's more widely accepted, I think, that it was Ellen Astor. And she said in her newspaper article account that one of the women gave her a shawl and a $5 gold piece.
Wow. Which was a lot by that money then, yes. I think it's 500 almost, isn't it? 2 zeros to add in the current money. So that
it was certainly a lot of money. And I mean, they didn't have any money. I mean, certainly they were very poor. And so $5 gold piece was a lot.
It's a lot, yes, yeah.
And so,
yeah, people, what Captain Rostron once said, not related to or did he say it in relation to Carpathia? Generally, he said, no, I don't think so. He kept it in mind when he was writing it, but he said in one of the newspaper articles that he believed in the good nature of people. And he said, if you scratch a little bit deeper from any person, like scratch deeper, you will see something really very good. And that was his attitude and his understanding of humans, of humanity, that whoever it is, whatever they did, if you scratch deep enough, you will see good. And I think that was so obvious during this rescue the operation, particularly this. If you think about Carpathia's passengers, they were going to the cruise, they were going to have fun in the Mediterranean, and instead, they had to abandon quite a lot of them, their cabins. They give the cabins to the survivors. They were sleeping, or they were sleeping together instead of one or two in the cabin, there were 5 or 6. So that means that people really, there was not a single complaint. And there were more than 700 passengers, not a single complaint. And what you just said, that they just wanted to give, they didn't have anything on themselves, only whatever they clothes. And this gold was probably some kind of the jewelry that was hanging on someone's neck or bracelet or whatever, and they gave it to your great grandmother because of this nature of humanity, of the human nature that Rostron was talking about.
Yeah, it was a beautiful outpouring of love and concern. Yeah. And I've never read anything negative. I mean, it's, they gave me their toothbrushes, their, everything, their undergarments.
Yes.
They gave them everything they had. They felt, so much pity for these people. And I think they were very generous with their consolation, that they really, that takes a lot. It's one thing to give somebody a dress, but to really spend time with them and console them. And
absolutely. And as I understand, this shop, there was open, and they kind of distributed everything that people needed from the Cunard shop. Another example of taking a responsibility that might not would have gone down very well with the owners of the ship, but by that time, I think everyone realized that such a great thing was done by Carpathia. No one is going to criticize them anymore. So they opened the shop, and I'm sure that those people didn't have money to pay for, so they just distributed the stuff. The toothbrushes were particularly in demand. But
they couldn't have had more than, I don't know, 20, 30. So they certainly didn't have enough. But it's such, to me, the story is on the Carpathia, especially, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but has there really been a movie about that?
No, definitely not. And I think the longest footage was on the A Night to Remember. There were also mini-series, quite interesting, I would say. Carpathia was well presented there. There was also another movie in 1996 as well, but I'm really quite upset with the major Titanic movie that they somehow managed to completely leave Carpathia out of this long 4 hours long footage or whatever. Not a single shot, only showing the deck of Carpathia, like if it was there or she was there by chance and just picked them up because they were floating around. So I must say, I might be saying something very unpopular, but I don't like this movie. The Titanic. Titanic, the major one.
Oh, okay.
I find it over sentimental and really a little bit artificial, maybe in comparison with A Night to Remember.
What did you think about the 1953 Titanic movie?
Yeah, I saw that with Barbara
Stanwyck.
Yes. I think it was good. It was good. It was all about the relationships, of course, more than again, because I'm not very objective in in when I watch or see or read anything about Titanic. I want to see the Carpathia being duly mentioned there and glorified. But when I don't see that, it's a little bit of taken aback usually. And as I said, again, there was no particular mention of that, but it wasn't. It was a good movie, I think.
Yeah, Leah, my great grandmother, and baby Philly went to the premiere of the 1953 Titanic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They actually saw it in a, I don't know, some kind of a smaller theater with other survivors like Edith Russell and the theater producer. Who am I thinking of? In any case, I think at that time they sent Life magazine, and Life magazine interviewed her, and they have a picture of my great grandmother at the premiere with Selena Cook, and they're crying, and you see them standing
Wow.
the tissues. And then I also have a picture, a publicity picture that was taken with Thelma Ritter, the movie actress.
Yes.
And it's Mama Axe, is what we called her, and Thelma Ritter and Philly.
Wow, that's in. And where you don't have anywhere repository where you can put up those pictures, or then on your Facebook or.
Well,
Oh yes. Wow.
so the left is Mama Axe. Well, actually, you can see on her blouse, it says it, Leah A.
Yes, 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 it does.
And then Thelma Ritter and my great uncle Phil. You know, you'll see a lot of in books where they call him Frank Axe. I think because my family business was a, auto salvage yard,
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't a manly name, Philip. So he kind of took his first name, which was Frank, and went by that, but it's the same person. You can see how Thelma Ritter was notoriously tiny. She was, I think, 5 feet tall. And so you can see,
really tiny.
yeah, you can see how short my great grandmother was. And my great grandfather was quite tall. He was 6'3", which was quite tall for that time period. And so, my great uncle was also tall. So actually, are there any other photos you would like to see?
They look really very nice and amazing.
Let me show you something, or the audience something.